Hello everyone, this is Zeeebo and welcome to this AFK journey video. So we have finally unlocked the max level for seasonal equipment, and in today's video we are going to talk about everything that's seasonal equipment related, what you want to take note of when you upgrade your equipments, what are the optimal equipments to upgrade, why you want to upgrade them, and talk about the max level comparison between the different equipments for their stats and see which one is the more valuable one to upgrade based on your own accounts. So first of all, let's start with the upgrading process. So upgrading for the equipments, I'll say, is relatively easy to understand. You spend forging stones, you spend gold to level up your equipments, and basically each equipment set will have different stats. So depending on which class you are maining, number one, I always talk about this even in the previous equipment guide. If you're only maining a few classes, for example, if you are running the OD comp, for example, for your AFK stage pushing, you're using a lot of rangers, tanks, and support for your dream round side of things, right? Then you just upgrade like these important classes, like your support, your tank, as well as your marksman one, because these equipments only affect the stats of that specific class. So if you don't use mage a lot, right, if you don't use warrior a lot, or if you don't use rogue a lot, you can, I'll say, like, sort of leave it aside first and then upgrade it later, because it's not a rush to upgrade every equipment. The equipment equates to stats, and the stats is only beneficial if you're using the units in the first place. So if your team or the pool of units that you're currently running, especially for those of you guys who are lower on resources, is not the class that you need to upgrade, then don't bother upgrading. There's no rush in upgrading them. Eventually you will get them up, but when you're progressing, you want to min-max in terms of having the stats you have, so that you have an easier time pushing your AFK challenge, you have an easier time doing more damage in Dream Realm. So that's the number one most important upgrading tip that I always tell people. Only upgrade the classes that you main, upgrade the classes that you use a lot. Obviously, if you're a whale, you have a lot of different collection, then you choose the classes to focus on based on your own needs. But if you are a whale, there's a very high chance you should have access resources to buy your equipment, so that won't be like a concern to you, right, if you're in that category. But for the equipment itself, the gold as well as the forging stones, I think forging stones is quite easy to get. Like, there's a lot of sources. You get it from recycling of equipments, you get it from Legends Trials. So as long as you are leveling, as long as you're progressing, as long as you are attempting your Legends Trials progression, I think forging stone side is not really a major issue, like if you have enough time to accumulate your forging stone. So there will be a few periods where you will be stuck in terms of like your leveling resources, so your level will be slowed down by a little bit. So by then your resources will be able to catch up and stock up, so by the time you upgrade into the next tier, you will have sufficient forging stones. So this is based on my opinions of my other accounts as well as my main account. But for the gold part, it's gonna cost a lot. So fortunately for me, I have a lot of gold stocked up, so it wasn't really a big issue for me. But it's quite a big issue for a lot of other players, especially those that are, I'll say, progressing ahead of curve. So they're upgrading their equipments ahead of what was intended, or they are doing deficit pushing, so every gold that they are using on their equipments are super important. So if you are in that category, right, if you haven't come into Song of Strife and you are that kind of player, then do take note that when you do your planning, right, you want to plan out what you want to upgrade, what benefits you the most, and then spend your gold and your forging stones accordingly. Because for forging stones, they are not a major issue until the very last one, but for gold side, it will be a major issue if you are like just always ahead of the curve. So that's the reason why, right, they are actually selling gold within the shop. For those of you guys who do not know, right, inside the Emporium shop, you're actually able to buy gold on a monthly basis over here. So the purpose of this gold is not for you to be baited to buying into them. These are for whales who have the gems. These are the whales who have the currencies available to exchange for more gold in the event they are heavily pushing against the deficit and they get stuck. So that's the purpose of this gold over here, right? So there is additional way you can get gold. So you get gold from this one, you get gold from arena, you get gold from recycling all your old equipments, and then you get gold from your AFK progression, obviously. So these are the two resources you need to take note of, and this is why you need to upgrade them. So with regards to gold management, there will be a period where you will face a deficit. So another way to min-max in terms of your, I'll say, like gold stuff is to take a look at the artifact artifacts and see which one is, I'll say, something that you use a lot. Because for the artifacts, as you guys can see, right, the cost of upgrading the artifacts per level increases tremendously as well. So from 1 to 10, I think it's quite manageable. From 11 to 20, the gold increment will increase a lot. And for me, it's because I have a lot of excess gold, but for a lot of other players or for yourself, you'll realize that, hey, I'll be facing a gold deficit. So that's where you can sort of drop certain artifacts which you are not using at all, or which you don't intend to use a lot based on what units you're fielding, so as to sort of save the gold for your equipment's upgrading. So that's one way you can balance out, because one thing you need to know is eventually you will be able to max out everything. Eventually with time you will be able to max out everything. So you want to upgrade the stuff that is of importance first, or that is going to aid you in terms of progression first. So that's my point, right? Manage your resources accordingly. So that's for the upgrading portion. For the equipments portion, I think there are already a few guides where they state which equipments are of a higher priority. So obviously if you are a more offensive class, like you are marksman, you are mage, you are warrior, then the equipments, the accessory, the gloves, they will be more important because they offer you the offensive stats, right? Depending on what your class needs the most, you upgrade the stuff accordingly. So that's one way to manage your resources. So that is if you are on the extreme and if you have like very scarce resource upgrading, then you choose according to what you need the most. Obviously you can upgrade all the classes all together, then you choose, okay, this equipment will benefit my warriors because they will do more damage, right? If I'm going for the beetle, then you want to upgrade like rangers for the dream realm, and then you want to upgrade mage for arena, you want to upgrade mage for supreme arena, so on and so forth. So you can upgrade everything. So one way you can do it is you upgrade by class, but if you want to upgrade all the classes, then you focus on what are the equipments that are important to the class specifically. So I think I already mentioned this in the original equipment guides, so that rule will still stay true and will probably stay true throughout. So that is for the equipment one. Okay, so we have come to the more important part of today's video, and that is comparing the level 400 stats across the different equipments and see which equipment of which class will give you the highest stats return for their upgrading. So let's start with the weapon side. So if you take a look at the weapon side, right, rogue, mage as well as marksman, they have the highest offensive stats, so it will probably be the better one to focus on them if you are talking about upgrading materials to stats returns. But depending on the situation, I'll say most of the time you don't need to upgrade weapons because you can get higher level equipments within the dream realm boxes. So save your materials for the weapon side because you will get them naturally. In fact, you will be able to get 400 equipments from the boxes, so you need not actually spend resources to upgrade them that fast. So that is something that you guys might want to take note of. For equipment side, it's important for the offensive classes like marksman, rogue, as well as mages, but it's not that of a rush because you get them naturally. Now for the next category of the equipment, so let's run through the second one. We have the hands. So for the hands portion, if you take a look at the stats, I'll say for hands, the higher value upgrading will be for the support, for the tanks, because the tanks gets a ton of defensive stats, and I'll say for warrior, to a certain extent, they are also pretty good in terms of value because warriors wants a little bit of attack and then wants a little bit of defense because some of them are like frontliners. So I think warrior, tank, as well as support, they are of the higher value in terms of upgrading. For mage and ranger, they are pretty close in terms of the stat line. So marksman is slightly more defensive by nature, mage will be slightly more offensive, but I think if you want to compare between the offensive classes, rogue is definitely the best of the bunch because they have like a stat that is really close in terms of the attack to the mage class, and they're way more defensive stats. So for the best hand side of things, support, warrior, as well as tank. For the offensive classes, I'll say rogue is of the higher value for the hands compartment. Then next we take a look at the third category, which is the accessories. So I'll say accessories will be mixed between offensive and defensive by nature. So defensive ones are ones where they give you a little bit of HP, where the offensive one is fully focused on offensive stats alone. So defensively, I think without a doubt, right, if you take a look at just raw numbers, I think obviously tank gives you the most HP, but The thing about a tank is that offense stats like crit as well as attack is not that important on them. Like, it is important, but it's not that important. So in terms of defensive category, I would say marksman is probably the best one because it offers quite a bit of HP and it offers the most attack. So marksman is the most valuable one, followed by support and then the tank portion. Now for the offensive category, right, for the offensive side of things, I think the mage one is probably the best, although rogue has 2 haste, but I think the 6% attack speed is gonna matter way more because for mages, right, their normal attack hits pretty hard as well because a lot of the mages has really high attack. So in terms of the offensive side of things, I think mage first, followed by rogue, and then the warrior class. So warrior class has the lower stats, obviously they are there, the lower category in terms of offense. So defensive side, right, it's marksman, support, and tank in terms of priority. Offensive side is mage, rogue, then warrior. Now we go into the fourth category, which is the head side. So head side, right, there's a lot of stats distribution, but I'll say hands down without a doubt, warrior's head is one of the strongest around because not only does it offer the most HP stat, it also offers the highest defensive stat, even higher than the tank. So defensively, right, it is the best for the warrior. So warrior will be the highest priority here. Next, I'll say it's support. Okay, the reason is because, right, later on you guys will see for the armor side, the tank gets a lot. But if you say, because tanks is a very defensive class and you think that you want to upgrade tank to the maximum level as soon as possible wherever you can, then tank and support can be put in the second most important category. So I'll say support and tank, they're the second and third. Then if you take a look at the more offensive classes, so for mage, for ranger as well as rogue, they all have, I'll say, some sort of stat lines to them. But for rogue side, right, in terms of the values, right, for rogue's defense, it's slightly lower compared to support, and it's definitely lower than warrior and tank. So in this case, I think rogue will be slightly lower in terms of priority for the head portion. So going by the grading, I'll say warrior first in terms of the head, tank and support about the same, marksman and mage is roughly about the same as well, and then rogue is the least priority. So that's for the head portion. So the second last category is the body itself. So if we take a look at the body numbers, I think it scales pretty well compared to the tanks, but the tank will still be the stronger one because the tank not only has a good balance of HP and defense, it also has vitality, which increases the efficiency of heals coming out from support. So I'll say tank is the topmost priority for the body side. Warrior is important, but depending on whether or not the warriors that you're using are more defensive or offensive by nature, you can choose to not upgrade the body. Although I think warrior's body value is quite high, so tank, warrior, and then support in terms of sheer values. Support defensive equipments are higher in value because they are supposed to be a more defensive class. So tank, warrior, and support. Now for the offensive classes, if you take a look at all the values itself, marksman has a higher defensive stats compared to mages, but mages has a lot more HP, whereas for rogue there's some sort of vitality in them. And stat wise, rogue's stat is also not as bad, although not as good as the defensive classes. So I'll say depending on whether or not you're running more defensive rogues, like rogues that can survive better like irons, or you're running the more assassin type of rogues that goes into battle and then snipe people off, body is not that high of a priority if you are in that category where you are more of the sniping classes. Obviously having more defensive stat will keep them alive for a little bit longer, but if you're min-maxing on your resources, then you kind of want to go all in on a glass cannon build. So rogues body will not be of the highest priority. But if you're using like irons consistently, you're using irons in almost every team setup they're running, then I think body is quite good because that will keep him alive for quite a bit, and the additional vitality is quite helpful from the heals. Then for the offensive classes in mage and marksman, marksman, I don't think the body is that important, because yes, it gives a good chunk of defensive stats, but like I mentioned multiple times, they are offensive classes, so their priority in the body side of things will be much lower compared to the defensive classes. Okay, so we have come to the last category, which is the legs. So before we talk about the legs itself, I figured out that the sword with the exploding icon, it's called range defense, and then the shield with the exploding icon is called crit defense, so crit resistance. So those reduce like the chances of crit as well as damage coming out from range attacks. So if you're more defensive by nature and you think that those stats are useful in keeping your survival, then you can upgrade the classes accordingly. So you can scroll back to the earlier comparisons. I think specifically it's for the body as well as the head that we have the crit resist as well as the range defense. So these are the two defensive equipments with those stats, so do take note. And for the last category, for the leg side, right, leg offers a very important offensive stat, which is crit rate. So I'll say for the leg side, the three of the most important classes will be rogue, mage as well as archer. So in this case, tank is also a good to have because of the 5 vitality, which greatly increases healing and shielding effects, keeping them alive a lot longer. Warrior is okay. If you are more offensive by nature, warrior is amazing because you get like defensive stats which are really high and you get crit. But I think warrior has a lot of good equipments out there that boost their stats effectively because they are more frail by nature. They need more stats to make up for their frontliners. So in terms of upgrading value to stats, the previous few equipments, which warriors equipments are on the top, they're definitely better. This one is good if you are like maxing out on warriors, if you main warriors, but if you're not maining on warriors, you're using like all the other offensive classes, mage, marksman and rogue, they get the best stats and they get the most useful stats among the classes. Tank is okay, warrior is third, and then support. I mean, the three classes, they're on top, and then we have tank at 4th, warrior at 5th in my honest take, and then support at the last class. So if you are using warrior as a main, I think warrior can also be the top priority. So depending on your own hero collection, depending on your own account, you decide which one is the highest priority based on what you need. So you guys can scroll through to the earlier chapters to talk about the different level 400 equipment stats, and then try to min-max from there if you're somebody who cares a lot in terms of min-maxing. And that's it for this video. Thank you very much for tuning in. Do remember to like and subscribe to see more, and I'll see you guys again in my next video. Bye guys.